We have here now this treaty that's been signed between Starmer and Macron, the great migrant deal, which is essentially trying to use a teaspoon to empty a swimming pool. There's a teaspoon with a hole in it as well. This is a deal that essentially is going to deport people from this country to France. But once you've deported the person, we have to take an equal number of people back again. So I'm not very good at mathematics, but I'm pretty sure if I give you one and I take one back, you're still left in the same position you were in beforehand.
So there's so many benefits to coming here. So if you're going to talk about deterrence, first of all, stop the benefits. That's the biggest, that's a big deterrent.
That's the big thing.
And then think of serious deterrence, not just, there's the odd chance you might have to go through a long-winded process with a lawyer. I mean, that's not going to put off anybody.
There were over 200 occasions this year. There were over 400 occasions, but there were 200 migrants whose identity was suppressed by the police. And the crazy thing is, national guidance from the College of Policing still doesn't require you to record this information.
Hello and welcome to Newspeak, our weekly look at the news agenda. I'm Peter Whittle, and with me, I'm pleased to say, the team is back together again. Yeah. Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, Senior Fellow and Royal Historian, Amy Gallagher of Stand Up to Woke, and Dr. Philip Kiszely, Senior Fellow, and indeed our National Organiser. Now, before we start talking about this week's various events, Philip, the never-ending list of locals goes on, doesn't it?
It does indeed, and you should be seeing it going across the screen as I speak now. But I'd like to just mention a couple of other things, Peter, if I may. We have a launch, a brand new group in Huddersfield and Halifax, and that is happening on the 13th. So which is next week, if you're anywhere around those areas, those two towns, if you're around Leeds, if you're around Manchester, anywhere in the north there, please do sign up and come along. Get involved. I'll be there. It'd be lovely to say hello to you. So that's on the 13th of August. That's our latest launch. That's on the back of Oxford last week, which was fantastic. Rafe was there in Oxford, and I think there were well over 60 people there. It was a fantastic night. The other thing is we also now, Locals has a Facebook page, NCF Locals. So if you're on Facebook, what I'd like you to do after you've watched this show is just go on to Facebook, log on to the NCF Locals page and sign up, because I want to create a big community on traditional social media. I think that's the way forward for us, because we need to be visible. So, like I say, I'd like you to do one thing this weekend, and it's log on to that Facebook page and follow us on social media. It's Locals, NCF Locals.
Great. Have you signed up?
No, I'm not on Facebook, but I can be.
Yours? You have? It's very nice.
Yeah, it's good.
It's nice and colourful.
Yeah, it's a really good atmosphere on there.
Yeah. Anyway, let's de-lighten the tone a bit, shall we? Rafe, there is a new initiative, the Starmer initiative with the boats, right? Is this just hooey or what?
Yes, I don't know whether to be depressed or infuriated or angry, but it's just yet again, year after year, decade after decade, seemingly, all we get are these grand announcements, and then you look into the details and see yet another completely ridiculous piece of nonsense. And we have here now this treaty that's been signed between Starmer and Macron, the great migrant deal, which is essentially trying to use a teaspoon to empty a swimming pool. There's a teaspoon with a hole in it as well. This is a deal that essentially is going to deport people from this country to France. But once you've deported the person, we have to take an equal number of people back again. So I'm not very good at mathematics, but I'm pretty sure if I give you one and I take one back, you're still left in the same position you were in beforehand. This deal is supposed to replace the Rwanda scheme as a deterrent. But when you look into the details, and you see that they're only going to be taking around 50 people a week at the start, to put that into context, in a year that will be just around 2,500 people or so. Now, we've already had 25,000 people this year coming over. It's going to probably be about 40,000 by the end of the year. So we're talking about less than one in 10. So those aren't bad odds. If you take over across the channel, you've probably got 1 in 15 chance of being deported. Those are pretty decent odds to go across the channel knowing you're not going to come over. It's even more ridiculous than that because France has to agree on what type of person they will take. So they can't be under 18. They can't be a risk to public order in the EU. They can't be a risk to public order in the UK. They can't have a human rights claim. They can't have been in the country for more than 3 months. So if you do get chosen to be deported, you just need to make a human rights claim, drag it out for 3 months, and the whole thing falls to pieces. Yeah. Anyway, it's such nonsense, and it simply is another case of Keir Starmer reading the room, realizing how strong immigration is now polling with the public, wanting to be seen to do something. France has got no desire to take... What is in France's interest to take our migrants back from them? This has been simply a shady deal done, and it's not even a proper treaty. This is only going to last for 11 months. Treaties normally last for decades or hundreds of years. It's an 11-month, a scam in my view. Wholly frustrating. We know what needs to be done. You need to make Britain more attractive than France. You need to have an offshore processing centre, particularly one of the British overseas territories. There are ways you can make Britain so unattractive and unwelcoming to really create a proper hostile environment. This does none of that, and nothing is going to change.
No. It's at this point, this is what we need to do. We need to have a offshore, Ascension Island, I think you said before, things like that. What do you make of what Nigel Farage said at that press conference, which really, God, did it resonate, actually, when he was asked what's going to happen, where are they going to go? And he said, look, I just don't care anymore. If they're from Afghanistan, back they go to Afghanistan. And I sort of felt someone said it. Why is the big problem? Why do we have to go through this particular thing of like having a processing centre and all of that?
Well, for the first point, no country is obliged to take anyone back. So even if you have an Afghani passport, you're not necessarily going to go back to Afghanistan. Now, interestingly, we've always said that we can't send people back to Afghanistan because it's not safe. The EU has now just started sending people back to Afghanistan. So there are really very few places in the country where you couldn't send people back to. But yes, that's one option. Of course, what's happening now, though, people are destroying their documents when they're in the Channel, we saw that with the Albanians. You could easily get on an EasyJet flight from Albania to the UK if you wanted to for a few £100. These people are choosing to pay thousands of pounds to destroy their documents coming over, which tells you a lot about the type of person who's coming over, obviously coming over for criminality. But the Australians have been the most successful people at stopping the boats from coming over. And they used the island of Nauru, which was 1,000 miles off the coast of Australia, hugely successful. We have British overseas territories that could perform just the same function. And unlike Rwanda, the European Court of Human Rights wouldn't be getting involved because we govern the British overseas territories, whereas in Rwanda they said, the Rwandan government and regime is not a very safe place to take people to. That wouldn't apply if we're actually processing them on our place. And again, my view is the real deterrent will be to tell these people you are never going to set foot on British soil. Yeah. If you're coming over in a dinghy and if we can't turn you back, we'll put you onto old cruise ships in the Channel and you're going to sit there till the cruise ship is filled up. Then we're going to sail it off to the South Georgia Islands. And once a few of those have gone to a windswept island in the Atlantic, the messaging will go out. And it wouldn't even need to last that long because people would soon understand you're never going to get to Blighty. Absolutely. And then that also requires, what we don't do, we need to advertise. The Danes did this. They took out adverts in newspapers, on radio, billboards in the Middle East saying, stay at home, stay in Germany, stay in France, don't come here. Because there's no point putting these laws across if no one actually on the French coast knows about the laws.
No, and I think we need to reinforce that as well by stopping the benefits. That's precisely, what we need to do. I mean, it was just last week, wasn't it? One day, I think 898 people came across on boats. That was just one day last week, and now he's proposing 50 a week, one in, one out. It's absolutely absurd. And of course, all of these people, the people who are going to be sent back, they are obviously going to appeal, aren't they? And Lisa Nandy was saying, they can appeal from France. No, they can't. They have to appeal from Britain, and that process will take years. So that just completely negates anything. Not that anything was going to happen anyway, because one in, one out equates to zero, but it just negates anything that could possibly have happened. I mean, that's that. But if you just look at the the language that Keir Starmer used. You know, it's these people face this kind of thing. It's not that we're going to get rid of these people. It's just that these people could possibly face being sent back. You know, I could possibly face being a millionaire tomorrow, but it's not going to happen, you know.
Actually,
so all you have to do is look at the detail and you know precisely what they mean. And what they don't mean is sending people back.
You see, that's it. The language thing is very important, actually, because I've always really objected to this. We're going to smash the gangs. It subtly moves the target, or maybe not so subtly. It's almost like
it takes it away from the
bat interested in the gangs. Probably they are doing something wrong. I just don't want these people coming in. That seems to be simple, but they just will not. They will not go that way, will they? It's always got to be, you know, gangs, obviously criminal gangs doing something terrible to these people.
Yeah, and you also sorry, just to finish the point very briefly. You have to remember all of these gimmicks. You have to remember all of this rhetoric. And has he smashed the gangs? No, of course he hasn't. You know, and he won't send people back either.
Well, the irony was, in Keir Starmer's speech, when he initiated this scheme this week, he said the era of broken promises and gimmicks is over with the scheme. It's the most gimmicky scheme you can imagine. It's like this weird raffle where there's a kind of small chance that you might get sent back, and even then your human rights law will probably stop it from happening. And that's supposed to be a deterrent, you know. And I don't think we should be even talking about deterrence, you know, so small like this, when there are all of those benefits. Like, why would you be deterred from coming here when you can come here and get free housing, free healthcare? There was a story this week saying a very large proportion of people on HC2 certificates, which is people that access free prescriptions from free dentistry, are asylum seekers. We give out over 1 million of these each year, and the majority, 1 million certificates for free prescriptions and free eye care. Yeah. And of the 1.5 million that we give out, 900,000 of them are asylum seekers. So the majority of them are asylum seekers. So there's so many benefits to coming here. So if you're going to talk about deterrence, first of all, stop the benefits. That's the biggest. That's a big deterrent.
That's the big thing.
And then think of serious deterrence, not just, you know, there's the odd chance you might have to go through a long-winded process with a lawyer. I mean, that's not going to put off anybody.
Hello. Please excuse this brief interruption, but I'd be really grateful if you could please hit the subscribe button and subscribe to our channel. Our mission is vitally important, and we must grow this channel to ensure that our content reaches the biggest possible audience. The best way to do this is for you to subscribe. It's totally free. And in addition to subscribing, if you're able to donate or join our membership scheme, please click on the link in the description or visit our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. We've got great plans ahead, but we can't do it without your support. From only £4 per month, you'll receive a range of perks and benefits, including exclusive content. Thank you.
Well, first thing you need to do is you need to stop the underground economy. I've said this for years. You're getting some talk about this now. People come here, you see these bikes outside the hotels, they're working for delivery apps, or they're working in the curry houses, but also rogue landlords who have 10, 15 people in a 2-bedroom apartment somewhere, don't do any background checks, get rid of all that. But also and you're talking about freebies, they're giving them even free trampoline classes and, you know, free martial arts classes. Now, call me old-fashioned. I don't want young men of fighting age being trained in street fighting tactics. But, you know, the key thing here is, after the Second World War, there were 250,000 Poles in this country who couldn't go back to Poland. It was the Polish army, and they had their children and wives with them. They lived for years in Nissan huts. They were in camps. They were called Polish resettlement camps. These young girls and women, some of them got married in these camps, lived there for many years. My mother's cousins were in those camps as well. Now, if those 1940s conditioned camps were fine for hundreds of thousands of women and children, why on earth are young men of fighting age today being put up in hotels and private accommodation? They should be in camps. If you did that, if they couldn't get any jobs, and they couldn't get any money, no benefits, you wouldn't make Britain less attractive than France, and they would stay there. The other thing to say, of course, is what's also rotten about this Starmer deal is if we deport people here, the ones we take back are people who have some connection to the UK. Yeah. And this is at the root cause of what we're seeing. The reason we're getting young men coming over here is because their families have pulled together money to send the son over here as a scout. These are not asylum seekers, they're not refugees, they're economic migrants. They come here, they get settled, and then they can bring 24 or whatever of their dependents over. We need to call it out for what it is. These are economic scouts. The real asylum seekers are the Ukrainians, women, the elderly, children, and the disabled. They're not the ones you're seeing coming over the channel.
Also, it's quite, it's sort of obscene. There was footage on social media of these guys being bussed into the Britannia Hotel in Canary Wharf at the dead of night, like 1:30 in the morning. And it's like they think that they're basically just going to kind of, manage to deceive us into not believing, to believing that there's no one in there. In fact, thank goodness, because we were up there filming, it was Ollie, last week. Thank goodness that people now will, they are tenacious. They stay there and they film things. Thank goodness for that. One thing I thought was quite interesting on this general issue, there was a poll came out this week, YouGov poll. It was about illegal migration and legal, and it was about 49% of people believe that we must now have a situation of what's called negative net migration, right? 49. They used to say, it's only 49. Well, it was by far the most popular choice when people were asked what they wanted to happen with immigration.
Yeah. Did you see this? I didn't see it, but I can understand it because we've seen this massive sea change, haven't we? Now, even just a few years ago, if people were talking about remigration or repatriation, that was a kind of a red flag, wasn't it? And that was, you are the National Front, neo-Nazi, and all of those kinds of things. Now it is mainstream, and now it's getting towards, the majority of people want this because for the first time, people are seeing that there is a kind of cultural warfare being waged against us. Now, this has been happening for the last 30 years. It's been happening with the radical aspects of Islamism, and it's been happening with the radical left. But that cultural warfare is the numbers of people who are conducting it are becoming larger and larger, and it's becoming more mainstream in those areas. We are now, this is how vulnerable we are. We are now only just waking up to the fact that they have been waging war on us for such a long time.
Yeah, there was also a poll showing that immigration concerns are the top issue for people politically. And of course, we've seen the rise of reform. They are now so high in the polls that if there was an election today, that they would win a majority.
They would definitely win a majority.
Yeah, so this issue is really, I think, very much, it's the issue actually at the moment now that everybody is concerned with.
And the reason for this, one of the reasons is Middle England is now waking up to the reality of immigration. So this is, hitherto, it's been very easy for the chattering classes to dismiss anyone who's concerned about this as being gammon, being racist, far-right, working-class thugs, because those have been the areas into which, scores of migrants have been dumped for year after year. And people who are, working-class, generally decent people, have been living at the coalface, seeing the realities every day, whereas people in their leafy suburbs and boroughs haven't had to experience that. Now, of course, because there are so many migrants who've come over and there simply isn't space for them, they've had to be rehoused. And when Angela Rayner said a few months ago, we're going to use hotels up and down the country, I thought this is going to be the moment, because the same thing happened with Macron when he tried to disperse them around the provinces. You saw the rise of Le Pen and the National Front over there. This is exactly what's happening, because I even saw the police commissioner, the police chief for Epping Forest said, but this is not the right place for migrants. We're a market town. And I thought, where is the right place? What are you saying? Just working class area? And that was very telling. Yeah. Oh, no, you can't possibly offend us and our middle class decency. This is why I think it's become such a real hot topic.
It's also, there are protests happening in places like Altrincham as well. If anybody knows Altrincham, it's like the Hampstead of the North. It's it's incredibly well heeled. And people are in a tailspin there, and rightly so, because their beautiful, chattering middle class lives are about to be turned upside down, and women and children are going to be at risk. It's as simple as
and
that.
All the polling shows the more homogenous, the more white an area is, the more pro-immigration it is. That's why it's Hampstead, Richmond, Scotland, Wales. This is where they're very pro-immigration, because they don't deal with the daily realities. Now things are turning.
And it's something really chilling, actually, isn't it? A lot of these migrants, to go back to the migrant hotels, have been charged as well with crime, haven't they?
Yeah, there was data showing that 200 asylum seekers, just in this year alone, who specifically the ones staying in migrant hotels, have been found guilty of crimes. In some instances, some of them have committed multiple offences. And if you break it down, you see that about 50% of the crimes are violent crimes, about a quarter are sex offences, and another quarter is robbery and theft. And of course, most of us have seen this week, well, we've seen it in the news multiple times, but it seems to be on a daily basis now, that there is some terrible sex attack on a child by an asylum seeker. There was a case particularly, 3 times this week, but there was a very shocking case in Warwickshire of a 12-year-old girl who was abducted, strangled and raped. And there was an attempted cover-up of the fact that the people that did this were asylum seekers. If you cast your man back to the event that happened in Liverpool, where a man drove his car through a crowd of people who was celebrating the football, his details and his ethnicity and the fact that he was white British was released immediately. And there was this idea that from now on, because of Southport, we weren't going to cover things up because the Southport was obviously seen as a cover-up. But with these asylum seeker crimes, particularly ones that are, terrible crimes against young girls, there does seem to still be an attempted cover-up. Now, people in local areas are clocking this, and they are, leaking the information, getting it out there as to what's happened, because obviously it's affecting families and communities. When it's a child that's been raped, it's obviously it's appalling. But it's outrageous that these asylum seekers are still being protected and the information is being withheld from us.
But who do we know who actually instituted this kind of suppression of information? Was it the police, or was it, because I heard about local councillors, 2 women, I believe, Lib Dems or something, I don't know, but I don't know what, but 2 women councillors who basically I think one was frantically calling up her colleagues. Is this right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yes, and more or less saying, just lay, don't,
and the concern was that if the information that they were asylum seekers was leaked to the press or people knew about it, it would affect community tensions, as we always hear.
That's always the main issue here is the police. So it's the police who haven't been recording the ethnicity and nationality status of perpetrators of these crimes. What this data that Amy is talking about reveals is that there were over 200 occasions this year. There were over 400 occasions, but there were 200 migrants whose identity was suppressed by the police. And the crazy thing is, national guidance from the College of Policing still doesn't require you to record this information. Now, Yvette Cooper on the back foot has now called for this to happen, but she's handed it over to the Law Commission to bring up guidance on whether or not it's in the public interest to record the ethnicity. Now, in our members section, we're going to be talking about the Law Commission and how woke it is. It is actually extremely left-wing. So I don't have that much confidence we're going to have them coming out with actually anything sensible.
No, and we still have fairly major political parties trying to just deny that all of it's happening. We had Mothin Ali, who's the Green councillor for Hare Hills, and remember all the stuff that was going on in Hare Hills last year. He just came out and said, well, all of this is far-right mythology and disinformation, and these people are, poor people desperate for a future, and just completely dismissing that all of this stuff is happening. Now, they used to be able to do that, and our film about that you produced, our film, which Alex Phillips presented, one of the things that you said, and one of the reasons why the film was so successful, is that the data was in. We had the data about all of this stuff. Now we do have the data. We're talking about there's 200 crimes from people who live in asylum hotels this year. Out of those 200 crimes, 109 are violent crimes, and there are 44 sex offences there. It's extraordinary. It's a wave of sexual violence against the women and children of this country. But now, this is why, I'm hoping and praying that the tide is turning a little bit, because people do have access to some of the data now. And all of this narrative, this maintaining this fictional narrative in the face of all of the data will get increasingly difficult for them. And I'm beginning to see people just standing up, making a stand, and not taking any of it.
Problem is, you see, it brings us on to another topic, is that they have they might be standing up more, but they're also going to be treated as big brother more and more. I mean, the general contraction of free speech. This is something, is it the Tories are demanding about Southport?
This is the National Security Online Information Team, okay? And this is a group of people in the government, an agency in the government that has been monitoring social media, monitoring particular posts, people posting about two-tier policing and people posting about migrant hotels. Those people have been monitored by this secret Big Brother department in government. Now, this was actually set up a few years ago by the Conservative Party, but it was set up to take on, technologically, to take on ISIS and the Muslim threat. And now this government is turning it on the people of this country. So this is quite obviously a massive threat to free speech. But it's also, I think, a massive threat to liberty as well, because what's the next stage with this? We know from, a very good friend of this channel, Alison Pearson, she tweeted something and then deleted it. And then a year later, she had the police knocking on the door. So I'm thinking about all of my tweets. We must be thinking about all of our tweets there. And this kind of thing will happen. I'm expecting a knock on the door and kind of bring it on. I think we all need to have that mindset to push back on this kind of stuff.
And the reason we know about this is because this unit within government was contacting the tech companies, contacting TikTok and others, and essentially flagging things, saying to them, have you seen this post? Why aren't you doing anything about this post? And so they were actually, in essence, they weren't saying take this down, but they were saying this violates your policies, you need to take this down. And we only know about this because US congressmen subpoenaed this information. And so now it's got to the point where it's American politicians who are holding the British government to account. It's such a disgraceful situation. Even the Department of State has got involved and said they're really worried about the loss of free speech. Obviously, they don't like British politicians telling American companies what is free speech and what's not. But it's a terribly chilling day that the land of liberty, the land that gave birth to free speech, is now being lectured on it by America, which entrenched English free speech in its constitution.
So can I ask, Gallagher, you know that obviously the background to all of this going on, I'm pleased to say, are these protests, right? Do you think that it's the protests constitute the start of something, or merely kind of a crack in the dam? By something, I use that word advisedly. Essentially is a peaceful uprising protest within the law by ordinary people. Do you think that this is the start of something, or will it fizzle out?
I think it is the start of something. And I think that, ongoing censorship and spying of people's posts, I don't think that that's going to contain the problem, because even if you shut off people from the information, we all see in our towns and our cities what's happening. People are increasingly hearing about someone on their road or in their community that was assaulted by a migrant. People are noticing that towns look different. So however much you suppress it online, you can't suppress what people see with their own eyes and ears in their daily life. So I think that will encourage people to vote in a certain way. And obviously we see Reform topping the polls. I do think it's been very heartening to see that these protests have been peaceful. It's been mostly a lot of women, actually, dressed in pink.
It's mothers and daughters.
Yeah,
mothers and daughters.
Showing that this isn't, this is just people who are just genuinely concerned about their safety. And it's very hard for anybody. I mean, I know people still try, but it's very hard for people to disagree with that when it's just families saying just we want to be safe and we want to protect women and girls. Labour always go on about, online misogyny and women's rights and so on in some areas. But it's, it's this issue that is really affecting women and girls, I think, more than any other issue.
Although, sorry, I was just going to add. With the women and girls, it's still, I'm afraid, a class issue.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I'm sorry, it still is. I just know in too many middle-class women or whatever, young women, who what they think when they look at those scenes of the women outside. Their reaction, a slight curled lip, a slight disdain, and it's appalling.
Yeah.
Utterly appalling. But I think, as you say, as you were saying earlier, Rafe, maybe the tide will turn when they start to feel the effects of it. Are you sanguine about?
Ask me on a cold, windy day in February if these things are still going on, and then I'll be able to give a better answer. I'd like to feel as though as Amy's just said, the tide has turned. I mean, if you would have said 2 or 3 years ago, Reform would be running away with the polls and topping the polls and really seriously looking to form a government in a few years' time, then I wouldn't have believed you. So anything's possible. I think the problem is that a lot of this is dependent on the awful stuff happening on a very regular basis. And I think it has to get a lot better. It's a cliche, isn't it? But it's true. It has to get a lot better before it gets worse. And people have to do 2 things. They have to be more angry and more frightened, unfortunately. But they have to remain peaceful and they have to remain thoughtful. This is why, I mean, I don't want to push locals too much, but this is why locals is so important. It's about association. It's about people getting together. It's about people making a difference. It's about people sharing information, sharing ideas. And that kind of, I hate the expression, but hive mind is what we need at the moment. It isn't just about presence on the street, although that is massively, massively important. It's about looking beyond that, because it's post-politics in a way, isn't it? It's something else. It's about how we deal with this balkanized society, and we need to organize, and it needs to be a fairly broad church, and we need to be with like-minded people.
I think these protests have the potential to be the start of something new. This is the year where migrant protests have become mainstream, where the far-right slur doesn't stick any longer. But as we've said on this channel many times, what will it take for the British people to wake up? We thought it would be the Manchester Arena bombing. We thought it would be the industrial-scale rape of young girls. We thought it would be the Southport. Nothing ever did it. Then you had the Afghanis being shipload here and there, thousands. Only made the newspaper for a few days, then drifted away. This has the potential to be different. But, you see, one of the things here no one is talking about. So the number of migrant hotels has halved from 400 to 200 under the Tories and now under the Labour Party. All that Labour needs to do is close down all the migrant hotels and people will be told, oh, it's over, the crisis is over, right? Problem is, where have they gone?
No, the crisis
They've gone into private accommodation. Yeah. They're no longer in a 4-star golf course down the road. They're living next door to you. They're seeing your kids every day. And this is the thing which we must make sure people don't fall for more spin, saying, oh, we closed down the hotels, nothing to see here, is actually an even bigger problem. And there's a potential to become actually much more of an issue, given that means that there's going to be even less housing for the indigenous population. People on housing waiting lists will be. You can remember there are 30,000 in hotels. There are 77,000 in private accommodation already. So we're talking about 100,000 illegal migrants are going to be in private accommodation if they close the hotels down. The question is, how will the British public react to that?
Also, I mean, you mentioned what will it take for people to wake up. As Amy said earlier, 3 cases on consecutive days of alleged sexual assault and rape. And you sort of think, oh, where is the outrage?
It's normalised now, isn't it?
Protests,
It's normalised.
We're going to carry on, actually. There you are. We're going to carry on a little bit now for our members. Do join our membership scheme, won't you? Because then you can carry on listening to more of what we've got to say. It's always worthwhile. In the meantime, thank you very much, and we shall see you next week. Our mission at the New Culture Forum is and always has been to defend and celebrate Britain's history, culture, and its people, and indeed Western civilization, at a time when both are under sustained attack. We have grown from small beginnings to become the country's most influential right-leaning cultural think tank. Our content is watched and read by some of Britain's most influential political figures. But now, we need your help. If you believe in what we do, then please do become a member. For as little as £4 a month, you can make a vital contribution to what we do. As a member of the NCF family, you will help ensure that we can continue to produce quality content online, such as our 3 weekly programs, Whittle, which is our flagship interview show, Newspeak, our panel discussion show, and Deprogrammed, which is targeted at Britain's youth. As you probably know, in addition, we produce important documentaries such as our critically acclaimed 6-part series, The West, a stunning celebration of the history and genius of Western civilization, and our ongoing documentary series, Heresies, with hard-hitting episodes tackling subjects such as immigration, gender ideology, and BBC bias. But the New Culture Forum is much more than a YouTube channel. We don't just complain about Britain as it is, we provide real solutions and clear policies on how we can push back against the madness and restore sanity to this nation. Our presenters are now highly sought after and have become familiar faces across the media. Our prestigious annual Smith Lecture and our regional and indeed national conferences have attracted world-class speakers. Perhaps most importantly, we are the only organisation on the right of politics that has launched a national movement without actually being a political party. And uniquely, through our NCF Locals programme, we've established some 30 active branches in towns and cities right across the nation, from Edinburgh to Exeter, and with many more on the way. We're very proud of what we've achieved, and our members have made it possible. In return, our members receive access to exclusive content, invitations to private events, free or discounted tickets to our conferences and lectures, free copies of our books, and much more. I very much hope that you'll join us too by clicking the link in the description or going to our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Now is the time that we need your help. Thank you.